Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order our Behavioral Health Committee. Madam Clerk, would you mind calling the roll?
Chair Braybeck.
I'm here.
Representatives Arbit, Pahutsky,
Here.
Glanville, Edwards,
Here.
McDonald, Rankin,
Here.
Schmaltz,
Here.
Hoadley,
Here.
St. Germain, Thompson. Madam Chair, you have 6 members present. You do have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I appreciate that. Representative Pahutsky moves to adopt the minutes from the October 26th meeting. Without objection, those minutes are adopted. Thanks, folks, for being here this morning. I really appreciate it. Today we're going to be taking up HB 5184 and 5185. There's going to be, we'll do the housekeeping things, and then I will explain a little bit about how we're using the time today, and then we'll move into the testimony. So we have an H1 substitute to HB 5184 that fixes a technical issue in the bill by correcting a reference to another section of law. Everyone on the committee received that, so you have that. Representative Edwards moves to adopt substitute H1 to HB 5184.
No, it has not been distributed.
We'll go ahead and call the chair. Okay, so welcome back, we're back. We are going to skip over the H1 substitute. We'll do that at a later time. And now we're gonna move into testimony. We anticipated being able to have an hour and a half for testimony today from our normal time from 9 to 10:30. Session has been moved up to 10 o'clock today. And so we are on a time, we have some time constraints that we need to work within and manage. All of my colleagues up here, we all have a hard stop at 9:50. We have several memorial resolutions, which means that we all need to be in our seats for Madam Pro Tem to be able to begin our session today. And so that is where we are. That means that, unfortunately, not everyone who wishes to testify is going to have the opportunity to testify today. That does not mean that there is potential, I should say, to have another hearing, but I wanted to get this ball rolling so that the work that Rep. Edwards and I have done can continue and work with all of you. So those are the constraints we're working under today. We have basically 35 minutes right now. We're going to try and get through 6 folks. I'm going to ask for folks to, including the rep and I, and I'm going to ask folks to try and limit their comments so that we can move through these and that folks have time for questions. Any questions from my colleagues up here? Okay, we'll go at ease.
The House Policy Subcommittee on Behavioral Health will come to order. We are going to, at this time, take testimony on House Bills 5184, introduced by Representative Brayback, and 5185, introduced by Representative Edwards. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, we appreciate being able to be here with you this morning. Today we're going to be talking about two bills, as the chair said, 5184 and 5185, known as the Social Work Licensure Modernization Act. Put very simply, this legislation will restructure social work licensing tiers in Michigan and remove the requirement of passing the Association of Social Work Board's social work exam to be able to become licensed. So that, for example, with this legislation, someone with an MSW, which is a Master's in Social Work, would be allowed to apply for and acquire their LMSW without taking the exam, but with other required hurdles, for example, supervision and education. Part of the impetus for this is taking a look at some of the data that we have gotten from ASWB and analyzing the pass rates on the social work exam. What that has done is highlighted some significant disparities and those existing and those who actually do pass the exam. So this disparity highlights what I believe are some things that we need to really focus on and concentrate in a potential flaw in the exam that creates then barriers for many to enter the field, particularly social workers of color and older social workers. Laura has also collaborated on this and with our Michigan schools to provide 10 years worth of data about those passing scores. So we have kind of a couple data points from which to work. One of the things that can get frustrating for our social workers is that, or folks who are getting ready to sit for this exam, is that if they fail, then they're taking that multiple times, which can come at a significant financial cost. And sometimes it can be, even though it's on the lower end of the licensure exams, it still can add up when you consider the cost of the exam, plus any study materials, any additional study courses, that can really add up. And so that really then limits, again, the amount of social workers who we have in the field and the amount, and being able to help with the workforce shortage and the crisis that we have on our hands here in Michigan. I do think that we need to be able to have measures by which folks receive their license. I think that that's very, very important. And there are a number of ways to do that. I just believe that a test isn't necessarily one of the best measures to do that. I know plenty of social workers who are many social workers who are not good test takers, who then are not able to practice. But I also know folks who can pass the exam who aren't really great in the field. And so both of those things exist. And so, one of the things that, Rep. Edwards and I have really tried to work on is what are the ways to be able to address that workforce shortage, get more social workers into our field in a much needed way, but really focus on how are our clinicians getting the skills that they need, and how is that being measured? And I don't think that a test is the best way to do that. So I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, but I'm happy to answer any questions once the three of us are done, and we can go from there.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the committee members for allowing us to speak to this bill, both bills 5184 and 5185. I kind of just want to mention that the examination is $260 or more. Each time the social worker fails that exam, they have to pay for it again. In addition to that, the study material, there is something called TDC, which is the Therapist Development Center. That test prep is $200 and almost $300 for that exam prep. There's another thing called Agents of Change. That's another course that you can take to pass your exam. That course is $275. So social workers are constantly putting money out there to pass these exams. It's not like they're not trying to pass the exams. I don't want anyone to think that we're just trying to remove the exam because people can't pass it. No, we are trying to pass it. We are paying a lot of money to try to pass that exam, but it's still difficult. And as Chair Brayback mentioned, the racial disparities are there. Laura released that information. It was leaked, but it's out there, and it indicates that minorities can't pass the exam. Individuals over a certain age can't pass that exam. The reality of it is that the exam is not necessary to be a social worker. You know, doctors have, people argue that doctors take exam and they pass it. You wouldn't go to a doctor who didn't take the exam. The reality is that you don't know what your doctor did. All you care is that your doctor is trained in the profession that they work in. Social workers are trained to the best of their ability, even beyond their ability. We have to take annual training courses, so it's not like it's just one and done. There's annual, there's updates, there's constant changes. We are required to take those changes and take those courses. So it's not like we are one and done and you take the course and you get your degree. That's not it. You continue to learn, you continue to grow. So, and that's all we're asking, is the ability to work in a field that we love and care for. And keep in mind, we don't get paid much to do it either. But it's something that you do with your heart. You do it from your heart, you work from your heart, and you don't care about the amount of money that you make for it. But what you care about is the people that you serve. You care about the people that you are working for and with. And that's the reason why we're trying to remove the examination, because it's not needed, it's not necessary for us to have to take that examination.
Good morning, Behavioral Health Subcommittee. My name is Dwayne Brejak. I'm the Executive Director for the National Association of Social Workers Michigan chapter, and I'm very excited to be able to represent our social work community here in Michigan in support of House Bills 5184 and 5185. Even before the pandemic, we know that rates of substance abuse, depression, and anxiety were inching higher across the country, including in Michigan. I know I've talked with many of you and your colleagues around the lack of resources and mental health shortages in many parts of the state. The grief, trauma, loss, and physical isolation over the last several years have driven Americans to need increased mental health support, and we have a provider shortage, which is just exacerbating the problem we have for folks to find their needed resources. This has been compounded additionally with the polarized political climate and the increased connection we all have with our global community, where we're witnessing war, destruction, and death on a daily basis. I think right now specifically, I don't think anybody can say they're not feeling lots of ways, and mental health is really top priority for us as an association. Our youth have been particularly impacted as losses from COVID and disruptions to routines and relationships have led to hopelessness, social isolation, anxiety, learning loss, and an increase in suicidal ideation. I think for many of our folks working in schools, you've seen that the first few months of this particular year has been really rough for many of our students across the state. We need changes and to build up our behavioral health community to meet the needs of today and to be prepared for the challenges of the future. House Bills 5184 and 5185 help do that in several important ways, by fixing our licensing tiers, by eliminating problematic barriers, and by creating a pathway for hundreds of social workers to re-enter the profession. As Chair Brejak mentioned, there are hundreds of social workers who have had to leave their jobs, who are no longer employed in critical roles in every county in the state, that are ready to step back into the profession right now if asked and able to, based off of licensing barriers. You may not know, but Michigan was the very last state to pass social work licensing, and it was less than 20 years ago in 2004. At that time, we became the 50th state to adopt a path for licensing, and that was essential to create title protection and to support our profession here in Michigan, and was the result of nearly 40 years of advocacy. And in that last roughly 20 years, we've learned a lot about what works, what's not been working so well, and heard directly from thousands of social workers across the state about barriers and possible solutions. In the last decade, I have provided 300 to 400 licensing workshops across the state of Michigan in my role at NASW, talking to students, faculty, and recent graduations, and trying to prepare our next generation of workforce to know the regulations that they'll be stepping into. Unfortunately, there are still huge barriers that are keeping out swaths of our new graduates and helping us retain a qualified workforce here in Michigan. These bills are the first time since 2004 that allow us to update and substantially improve the social work licensing in Michigan. This update will provide a more equitable regulatory process for social workers coming into the field, while also providing an immediate path for people to come back. They will do that in really two specific ways that I want to mention today. First, they'll update our licensing tiers that will mirror the vast majority of other states across the country. Michigan is the only state that uses a limited license process. Most other states, when you graduate, you have an LMSW, a licensed master social worker, which is their intro level licensing. In Michigan, you have a limited license, an LLMSW, then with a special designation after it. What this has then caused is lots of confusion around billing and credentialing across the country, as many other states and insurance panels view Michigan licensing as less than because our letters look a little bit different than the national landscape. Second, these bills eliminate unnecessary problematic barriers, including a biased examination. Like Rep. Brayback mentioned, in August of 2022, ASWB released 10 years of data, and this is after decades of advocacy by social workers, licensing boards, and organizations to get this information. The data released showed really problematic disparities between many of our population here in Michigan, including in race, age, gender, and those who have English as a second language. I want to highlight one specific statistic in the data that was released that I think will really highlight why these changes are necessary. So over the last 10 years, only 446 out of 1,582 of our black social workers passed the exam on the first attempt. Roughly a third, less than a third of our social workers here in Michigan passed their exam on the black social workers. From those that failed the exam, this was nearly $300,000 of fees that were paid that did not lead to professional advancement or an advanced credential. We know that our black social workers are on average having to take the exam at least 3 times to pass the process. And because Michigan only allows social workers to renew their license 6 times, many of the folks are just hitting that cap and then no longer able to remain in the field. Additionally, if you look at the last 3 years of data available from 2018 to 2021, test takers across the board are doing significantly worse than over the previous 7 years prior to that, highlighting that disparities are actually growing instead of shrinking. During those 3 years, white test takers' eventual pass rates dropped from an 89% to an 82%, and our black test takers in Michigan dropped from a 51% eventual pass rate to a 41%. So we have nearly 60% of Michigan's black social workers that will never be able to be fully licensed in Michigan because of this examination. That is a huge problem, and that's just one category that we look at. There are other disparities that also exist within this particular process. In the more than year since the data was released, still nothing has been done by ASWB to assist current test takers to reduce the disparities, even after specific and reasonable steps and suggestions were provided by NASW, the Council on Social Work Education, and our national deans and directors. While for many, it may feel radical for some to eliminate or remove standardized testing, it's becoming more and more regular amongst institutions of higher education, as well as in regulation for a variety of professions. In fact, more than 1/3 of all of Michigan's social workers who are licensed right now, who were grandparented in 2005, didn't pass a standardized test. Those are our most seasoned clinicians, our supervisors, and those leading many of our organizations today. And like mentioned earlier, it is critical to acknowledge that even without the exam, social workers have a high bar to enter our profession. This includes earning nearly 1,000 hours of supervised practicum experience, then graduating from an accredited school of social work. Then once graduating, you have to earn 4,000 hours of advanced work while under supervision of a fully licensed social worker. Michigan's 4,000 hours of supervision is the most out of any state. And once fully licensed, all social workers are mandated to earn 45 hours of continuing education every 3 years. In comparison, our counselors here in Michigan don't have to take any continuing education post-licensure. So we know that our standards are continual throughout someone's professional journey. We know that licensing exists to protect the public ultimately, and we know that these bills will just strengthen our state by bringing in hundreds, if not thousands, of more professionals into regulations, which we have seen in state after state that has adopted similar rules over the last year or two. I want to thank you for helping Michigan be a national leader and for your support of the critical work that social workers are doing across the state. House Bills 5184 and 5185 will fix major flaws in our current licensing process, help our organizations retain crucial talent, and give Michigan residents the competent and diverse workforce they deserve. So I urge your support of these bills when they come up for a vote, and I'm happy to answer any questions with my colleagues here. Thank you.
Thank you. Briefly, we do have a couple of questions. Representative Schmaltz?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate social workers. I know it's tough work, and you do need a heart to be doing this kind of work. And social workers, though, deal with the most vulnerable in our society. So it's really important to have the training and education and the requirements. So why would we want to take away a requirement like this? I understand we need social workers. There's a shortage, but we can't have quantity over quality. We need to make sure that who you're dealing with, you know how to be dealing with them.
Go ahead.
Great. Thanks for the question, Rep. Schmaltz, and I agree with you. To me, though, being able to take a test and pass a test is not does not equate to you being a good social worker. To me, it equates to being able to take a test and know some things. And I give the example when I was studying. So I've taken lots of these tests. Right? I have a social work degree. I have a psychology degree. And when I was studying for one of these, and I'm a terrible test taker. I will admit that. My husband walked in. He knows nothing about, he knows about mental health, but he hasn't had, however many years of education that I've had. He walked in and he was like, "That's the answer." And I literally threw up my hands because I was like, "Oh, you got to be kidding me. Like, how do you know that? How did you figure that out?" But he's an excellent test taker, right? He's the person who got a perfect score on the ACT, right? And so to me, being able to figure out what actually measures and lets us know this person is competent and knows what they are doing in this field, and I have serious questions about a test being a measure of that. Now, I understand that that's been something that we've done for lots of professions, so we're used to that, right? We're used to, if you can pass this test, then that means that you are proficient. I just don't think that there's that equivalency.
Well, I understand that that's one part of all the requirements. I still question whether we want to take that away. That's, that's important. Has there been talk about updating the exams and maybe cutting the fees to make it easier?
Do you want, I have an answer to it? Yeah, go ahead.
So over a year ago, there was a whole slew of recommendations provided from various organizations to ASWB, which included eliminating exam fees, making prep available more readily or free for repeat test takers, allowing folks to just take the sections of the exam again that they failed the first time. None of those have had any acknowledgement in the last year, which is why we are taking this route now. There's been lots of conversations about, can we fix the exam? And I think the social work general community does not feel confident or trusted that ASWB will make changes, because there's been, at least I've been in the field for 11 years of lies that this data didn't exist at all, and then it just got dropped. So a year before ASWB officially released the data, our schools of social work worked with Laura to get Michigan's pass rate data, and then they cross-referenced it with their school graduation data so they could kind of sync up the best as possible, because we were told that national data did not exist. And that was released roughly the same time that ASWB came out with their information. And so we know that it's been pushing, we've been hearing from our social workers for 20 years since Michigan has had licensing that this has been a barrier. And if the pass rates were somewhat equitable, we would have at least 1,000 more social workers of color in our state just over the last 10 years. And so, I have not felt very confident that changes will realistically be made, and how are those going to be broadly distributed across all of the country, and the resources provided to make sure that our social workers on the ground actually have the tools they need to pass the test.
Thank you for your testimony.
I can add one more thing. We do, I know that we're running on time, and so I'm hoping that we can wrap up, but we do have someone here from ASWB so that you can hear directly from them and ask these questions as well. Again, I wish we had more time to be able to, but yeah, absolutely.
Representative Glanville?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for bringing this forward. So I completely support what you're saying about this exam, and I just want to point out that, I think exam licensure is maybe more appropriate for more technical types of jobs where there's sort of a checklist or a very recognized process to how something gets done. Even my son, who's in med school, like I would expect him to be able to pass, an anatomy exam where he can clearly identify, muscles and nerves and all the things. But when we look at something like social work, right, the context for each individual case, like you cannot put that onto an exam and everybody's going to get the same answer. So I can see where this would be an incredibly difficult profession to capture on a standardized test like that. So, and I appreciate what my colleague was saying about the training and education. And I took some notes while you were talking, and it's just incredible to me. I mean, first of all, you have to go through a university program, accredited. So there's some training, 45 hours every 3 years, continual training throughout your profession, 1,000 hours of supervised practicum while you're in school, and I looked, and then 4,000 hours after. So did some quick math here this morning after 3 hours of sleep. And according to Google, if you work 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, that is 2,080 hours of work. So we are asking our social workers to put in twice that, and assuming they're not working 40 hours, 52 weeks a year. And that's in their supervised training. And as students, they're doing 1,000. So again, that's like half of a whole full-time year of work. So I feel like, what I'm seeing here is that there is adequate training and supervision and education going on here. And it really, I think, really does point to the fact that this exam is problematic. We've talked about it already before in this committee. And so I'm certainly glad that you're bringing this forward and look forward to hearing from other speakers. Thank you.
Representative Reingans?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, fellow social workers. So I have an MSW, and I taught at the University of Michigan School of Social Work for 7 years. And I just want to point out that over that time, I've become really strong in my belief that the people who practice in a profession are the ones that really know what they're doing and what it requires to be competent in that profession. And in the profession of social work, as Rep. Glanville just mentioned, there are competencies that are laid out throughout the training process and the supervision process where you must work closely with your supervisor to demonstrate through practice that you are in fact competent in these various competencies. So I am what is called a macro social worker. I focus on policy. I don't deal with individual symptoms of individual patients the way my husband, a mental health social worker, does. So we have different competencies. Why would we take the same exam? I would have to take the same exam as him in order to get licensed. And to me, it's not worth it because I don't need to do therapy with people and pass questions about therapeutic symptoms. So I really want to applaud you for pushing for our profession to really demonstrate the competencies that we have by making sure that it remains competency-based, and through that tight relationship with the multiple supervisors that we have over the course of our training and our career at the beginning. So thank you for being here, and I can't wait to vote yes to change these. And I do want to just make one last comment that
Rep,
social work...
we don't have a lot. Do you have a question?
Do you think the fact that social work is majority women has anything to do with the fact that we have to prove ourselves on paper instead of just by practice?
Yes.
Succinct. Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First and foremost, I like the fact that I see tier levels. That's something that I thought about when I thought about how do we fix our mental health and our healthcare system across the board. Do we have enough ancillary care, supportive care, levels of care? One thing I think that we need to take out of the equation is the women. I mean, I'm a nurse. I'm a woman. I passed my NCLEX. I went to school at Wayne County Community College, where I was the minority white girl. And all of the nurses in my class passed their exam. So one thing I'd like to know is, I know they're hard. I know they're hard. There's always, and if for those of you that don't know, there's 4 questions. 2 of them are right, 2 of them are wrong. And you have to figure out which one that is right is actually right. And my husband too, in being in nursing school, he would say things and I would be like, how did you know that? I'm the one in nursing school. How do you understand that? So I get all that. If we were to take that out of the equation with women and racial bias, what would be a question that would be on this exam that would indicate a racial bias that is causing our black women not to be able to pass these tests? Do we have an answer to that?
I think that question might be served best for one of the other speakers who will be coming to talk about the validity of the test.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Having no further questions for this group, the subcommittee will go at ease.
All right, folks, we are back. We literally have like 12 minutes, and so I am hoping to get through 3 people. So colleagues, I'm going to ask if you have questions, keep them very, very, very succinct. And for folks who are coming up, please keep your comments very short. I'm sorry we don't have more time today. But first, I'd like to invite Dr. Stacy Hardy Chandler, who is the CEO of the Association of the Social Work Boards. Oh, she's on Zoom. I thought she was here. Sorry. There she is. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairperson Brayback and distinguished committee members. I'm Stacy Hardy Chandler, a licensed clinical social worker, and I serve as the CEO of the Association of Social Work Boards. ASWB is the nonprofit organization that helps the Michigan Board of Social Work and its 63 other jurisdictional members in the U.S. and Canada fulfill their governmental mandate to protect the public through the regulation of the social work profession. And for over 40 years, we have taken that responsibility very seriously, knowing that your board's work helps to ensure that those who enter the social work profession are qualified and effective in serving the most vulnerable people in our communities. Chairperson Brayback, I appreciated the opportunity to discuss this issue with you earlier this week, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to testify on HB 5184 today. Thank you for your interest and longstanding efforts in support of public health. I believe that to be a place of common ground for everyone here, but unfortunately, it's also the core of why ASWB must oppose this legislation. While well-informed, its consequences will not support human service outcomes and will detract from the true fundamental root causes of the challenges social work faces. I want to discuss with the committee the nature of the communities that social workers serve in Michigan and elsewhere, and I'm sure you're aware of this. Among others, we serve children who have been neglected and abused. We serve at-risk teenagers. We serve survivors of domestic violence. We serve veterans returning home from the battlefield. So we have to ask the question whether we want those who grant licenses to serve these populations to have the critical information from a consistently applied, valid, and reliable measure of competency available to them in making these decisions, and we believe they do. Many of those whom social workers serve have no voice or choice in the who might be assigned to them. So it's your licensing board who should be supported in their decision-making process. Social work licensing is one part of an overall system that educates, regulates, and advocates for our profession. ASWB works collaboratively with other healthcare regulatory associations like medicine, like nursing, occupational therapy, physical therapy, psychology. And we all have essentially the same mission of serving our respective jurisdictional boards who have to account to the public for their decisions. Licensing exams across disciplines help them do that. And for social work boards, it helps them be accountable to the public for what they get when someone is called a licensed social worker. There's been discussion about the exam as bias, and this is simply not true. Do not confuse systemic origins with disparate outcomes. Healthcare regulatory standards require the employment of extensive anti-bias measures that include practicing social workers, plus third-party psychometrics. So both people and numbers, and this is the same process across human service professions. The blueprint for exam content comes from asking practicing social workers what knowledge, skills, and abilities are needed on day one on the job. That blueprint is used by item writers who are all practicing social workers and are trained in anti-bias test writing and are themselves selected across diverse demographic categories such as race, ethnicity, region, and practice area. You can see them in our yearbook online. The items they submit are thoroughly and rigorously vetted, first by a pool of external consultants, exam committees who are also diverse groups of social work subject matter experts for each category of practice. Then, if questions make it to that level and they pass the committee, they're psychometrically pre-tested before they ever make it onto the scored part of the test. All items that show any statistical difference across groups are thrown out. This is regulation's contribution to licensure decisions. It is an exam about practice, driven by those in practice. And I know nowhere else in our professional system where these layers of checks and balances exist. The exam, along with education, along with supervision, together help licensing boards make the best possible decisions as part of their obligation to the public. So let me say, we support competence measures as the regulatory component of licensure decisions. Right now, the valid and reliable mechanism that is the exam, but we are completely open, contrary to what was said earlier, to what different types of measures and formats could be used in the future, such as modularized testing. Entry to practice competence measures will and should evolve, and we want to work across the profession toward what that might look like. So the test is not the source of bias we see in the pass rate disparities. Rather, it is accurately picking up on the differences reflected in our society, where sadly people do not have come to licensure with equal access to resources and opportunities. And that's the part that should be of concern to everyone here. Support for this comes from looking at pass rates across academic institutions. Pass rates are not uniform across demographics by institution. So, for example, Black pass rates vary significantly by school. Some schools have very high pass rates, some have very low. There are many factors that contribute to the prospective social worker's ability to pass the exam. I'm living proof of it. And those factors are the true variables we need to come together as a professional community to address collaboratively. There have also been discussions that workforce shortages are somehow connected to the exam. You will hear legislation about other states cited in their increases in social workers. What you won't hear about is why those social workers are leaving the profession. In particular, the social work workforce is impacted by many factors, including long hours, the stress of the job, unmanageable caseloads, low pay. Eliminating the competence exams will not solve those problems. So just a couple of personal notes. I'm a long-term member of NASW, so they do not represent the opinions of all members nationally. I respectfully ask that this committee not single out social work, a historically female profession. Our board took the bold step of being the first and still the only Health or Human Service Association to invest in the analysis and publication of pass rate data at this degree, so that we can have these kinds of conversations and potentially create opportunities for collaboration. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hardy Chandler. We have time for one question. Rep. Podsky.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for your testimony and for touching on the concerns and the possibility of augmenting the exam to address some of the concerns that folks have raised. If I was understanding the previous testimony correctly, there's been about a year where this data, which I understand you disagree with the root cause of it, which that's fine. But it's been about a year that has existed, and around that same time, a little bit longer, I think, if I understood that correctly, that the recommendations or requests about changing the exam have been out there. Where are we in the process of changing that, since there does seem to be a willingness?
We have a third-party external group that is researching options, including remote proctoring, including modularized exams where people only retake parts of that. And we are looking at those. However, these exams, you heard the magnitude of it. They don't turn on a year. We have to administer valid and reliable exams under regulatory standards. So that's a process that does take time. The next blueprint, the survey for the blueprint will launch in 2024. That's when we will get a whole survey of the social work profession, and that will form the foundation of the next iteration of exams.
So we're currently in the research phase, and then we're going to do a planning, and then maybe we'll change it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And happy to send the committee all of the information related to that work, other initiatives to hear the journeys of licensure candidates.
Dr. Hardy
other
Chandler,
initiatives and research that we're doing. So I'm happy to send that packet to the
that would be
committee.
great. I'm sorry to cut you off. I want to be able to get, we need to move along. I'm so sorry. Colleagues, if you have questions, please send them to me and we can get answers for folks. So please send those to me. Thank you so much, Dr. Hardy Chandler. Folks, we have only a couple of minutes. We have like 5 minutes. I'd like to call up Dr. Cheryl Kubiak and Robert Sheehan. Dr. Cheryl Kubiak is the Dean of Wayne State University School of Social Work. Robert Sheehan is the CEO of the Community Mental Health Association of Michigan. I'm so sorry. You both literally have like 2 minutes, and that's it. I apologize. I apologize profusely. I'll feed my minutes,
Thank you. Thanks so much for having us. I am the Dean of the School of Social Work at Wayne State University. It is the largest and most diverse school in this state. I represent all of the deans and directors of the 13 schools of social work who have signed a letter in favor of this legislation. We did not start this quest this year or last year. I've been dean since 2018 and meeting with ASWB since 2018, asking for resolution, asking for changes. I think there's 4 things I'd like you to know. First of all, schools of social work have a very rigorous standard to meet accreditation standards. We have to do self-studies. We have to collect data at the level of the student, the course, and the program to make sure that we meet those standards. As was mentioned before, students have to do supervised practicum as part of their education. They're supervised by an agency instructor, a school instructor, and the practicum office. That's the first thing. This is a level of rigor that is a hardship. Our self-study that went in this summer was 900 pages of data on our program. That was already mentioned what post-graduation requirements there are before licensure can take place. Although we strongly support licensure, this exam is not a reflection of social work practice. We teach our social workers to look at the context of the situation, of what are the dynamics of that situation, what are the dynamics of the family, what are the resources available. And every single answer may be different, dependent on the context. Someone said, I think Rep. Thompson, you said that there were 2 answers right and 2 answers wrong on the nursing exam. All of the answers on the social work are right. You have to choose the rightest answer. And that can differ depending on what the context is of the test taker and what their experiences have been. The second thing that I want to organize is this pathway to licensure is affecting our workforce. And Bob Shaheen and I and NASW and all the deans and directors have been working very hard to make sure that we can increase access to our vulnerable communities for social workers. The fourth thing that I want to tell you is that Michigan is not alone. I also am a co-chair of a national task force on social work licensure, and I can tell you that 19 states are currently in the process of mitigating the action of this exam because they are seeing the same patterns across states, across schools. And then I finally want to end with that we have been in recent dialogue at a national level with the social work organizations. It is the first time that we have come together with ASWB to say there has to be a communal way forward, except that is years down the road. Dr. Chandler talked about psychometrics. The psychometrics currently are called industry standards that you would use on the ACT or the SAT. They are not industry standards for psychometric evaluation of assessments. Those of us in research who have done this work, my colleague Brian Victor in the audience, will tell you that the psychometrics are not there on this examination. So I'm going to let Bob say whatever he can in the time left.
I'll just make 4 points. We're in strong support. Association represents the public mental health system, probably the largest employers of social workers in the state. 4 points, and they're summarized in my written testimony. We're looking to move to get rid of a false barrier to social work and reinforce the strength of the proven methods, clinical supervision, a certified graduate program, and an additional 4,000 hours post-graduation. Second is it'll bring a lot of social workers back in the field. When other states did this, Illinois is the most recent example, they typically get 400 social worker licenses a year. When they change the licensing law to match the proposal that we're making, 3,000 social workers entered the field. Third is we bring into the field a lot of people with experience. It's ironic that the more experienced you are as a social worker, and I'm a pretty experienced social worker, my grandkids would call me an old guy, my chance of passing it is lower than somebody who hasn't practiced, who just left grad school. And last is it lines our requirements to those with the other states with whom we compete for social work talent. Thanks.
Thank you both for being here. I really appreciate it. Committee members, any questions for Dean Kubiak or for Mr. Sheehan today? Okay, we don't take questions from the audience. I can speak with you afterwards. Happy to do that, but we don't have time for testimony in that way. Thank you both for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all.
So colleagues, we'll continue to have this conversation and work on these issues over the next couple of months. I'm grateful to all who came today to speak on it. Again, I'm sorry that we couldn't get to everyone. We don't make the decisions about when sessions start, so I apologize. Per the clerk, any cards that are submitted will be recorded into the minutes. And then Representative Schmaltz moves to excuse all absent members. There being no further business before the committee will stand adjourned. Thanks, everyone.